So Susanna Kenton, she is a very dear friend of mine. She is a voiceover artist who's been doing it longer than anyone I know in terms of home voiceover artistry. Very talented. Let's just see a little bit of her work before we get into the interview.
This thermostat will make you love your thermostat. It's in millions of homes around the world. It's helped save billions of kilowatt hours of energy so far. And that's just the beginning. Imagine trying to reinvent something that has existed for over 100 years. What if you found a way to put the inspirations of the past in a new perspective? How would you start again without forgetting what you already knew? Think ahead. The world is changing. This is a film about psychological warfare. A specific type of warfare designed to distract, misinform,
but trust me,
and anesthetize the brain. Become a trap. And this hysteria is not because they have found God, but because they are receiving sneakers. We all want the best for our pets, but when they get sick, vet bills can skyrocket. So here's a little known fact that could help. Medication and food prescribed by your vet doesn't have to be purchased from your vet. With BioVet, you could make huge savings. We get all our pet meds and food from the same UK sources as your vet, and ordering is easy too. Simply give us a call or go online. Send us your prescription and we'll normally deliver next day to your door. Find out what you could save on pet care at biovet.co.uk.
It's my very great pleasure to welcome to the Gravy for the Brain Oceania interview, Susanna Kenton, who I've known for a number of years. I've been trying to remember how many years it is, but she has been one of my kind of voiceover inspirations. And she's in Christchurch, New Zealand. And do you want to just tell us a bit about where you are at currently with voiceover at the moment, Susanna?
You know, oddly enough, I've been in it for a while and I am loving it more than ever for really strange reasons that are very kind of inner. The reason being that I love the art of trying to find the truth in any given situation with any given script. You know, dive straight into like the deep end, but
it's brilliant.
And so what I noticed is there was a time when I was like, oh, I really want to be voicing scripts that are more in alignment with my values, what I love most. And then I realized like what a blessing it was to have work during this, you know, period of lockdown and when everyone was struggling and frightened about what's next. And I became just so grateful for the next project that would come into my inbox. And what I loved was the opportunity to voice it, to really honor the product or the company, and the acting job to find the right voice for each project, which I think is something very nebulous. You know, every project, every company is different. So
yeah, entirely.
I love that challenge.
So what kind do you put yourself into into a genre or an accent or an area of voiceover?
You know, mostly, Toby, I've voiced from my natural accent, which is probably mostly British, but because I've lived in the States and other places, it's kind of it's a bit softer, so it's not a very strict British accent. And sometimes when I hear strict British accent, it makes me realize how far from that my accent has moved. But yeah, I sometimes do voice an American accent as well because I was born in the States, and that comes fairly easily to me. But I wouldn't say that I specialize in accents. I'll give one a go when somebody asks for one. But what I found is, and I think this is true for most people, that doing well in voiceover is more to do with the delivery than any particular accent. And it's more to do with kind of coming from your heart and connecting with something that then translates. People hear it. It's, I've said this to you before, that I tend to go by feel. And, you know, you and I recently had a chat about rates and how rates change and what you should do in rate sheets. And you have the most amazing setup for that. You very sweetly sent me a rate sheet and I was just blown away by how beautifully thought out it was, and appropriate, and kind of fair for companies of all different sizes with your tier system. But for me, across the board, I tend to go by feel with most of what I do. Maybe that's more of a female thing than male thing. I don't know.
So you're more of an intuitive, sort of, you feel your way around things as well.
I seem to,
Yeah,
yes.
I completely agree with you though, in terms of like people get hung up on accents. And I feel like I went through a phase where I was trying to do the accent perfectly. And then you kind of almost break through that and do realize that people are not actually listening to the accent necessarily. And if you can tune into, like, for example, like Americans, how Americans speak, it comes from a different place to the way British people speak. And if you can find that place rather than find the vowel or find the consonant or whatever, then, you know, it's about listening more than it is about doing, I think. And I think
Yeah,
you're totally
totally.
right. You know, if you
That's
come
really
into it,
true.
yeah, if you go into it from
I
an
think
intuitive place.
there's an American spirit that is, you know, I got to live there for 7 years in Los Angeles, and there's a way that Americans talk that's just kind of free flowing, and it's just kind of easy, and it's not, I mean, that's a Californian, more of a Californian way of talking. But if for those of us, maybe you are right, Toby, maybe I am intuitive. For those of us that tend to go by feel, it's catching the vibe of it and letting that just kind of come through the voice. Because if you're voicing a piece of copy and you're trying to get the accent right, think about so much of your brain power is going towards trying to get it right. Whereas when you can just kind of relax into it, then you can focus more on the intention, you know, as an actor behind the script.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. That's so true. I've often, well, one of the things that the best advice that I heard for doing American accents was that Americans speak in what's the word? They speak in concepts rather than sentences. So it's like there's one point to the sentence, and it's easy to like note, like I'm gonna go get my coat from the car. Right, rather than I am going to go and get my coat from the car. Like it's like coat and car, and you just make the leap yourself, you know. So it's like focusing on the intent of the script rather than the actual words itself, which was really
and
helpful
also
to me.
I've heard it said that Americans focus more on vowels rather than consonants. So it's, I'm gonna go get my coat from the car. I'm gonna, like, they draw out the vowels instead of.
Yeah, that's so true. And do you also still voice in French? You did French for a while, didn't you?
Yeah, I lived in France for 7 years, and there I was an actress, and so I would act in French, but with a kind of a British or an American accent. I actually did a play there for 2 years where I had an American accent speaking in French. But I mean, there are so many people that speak better French than me, so I just let them do the French voicing. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and I really believe, you know, for people that are just getting into voiceover, it's about finding your own kind of excitement around it and what inspires you. Like people that love to do a lot of different accents or character voices are very well suited to animation or video games and stuff. And that can be so much fun to do. You know, the sort of stuff that I do tends to be more corporate, I would say, you know, and not as much in that realm of playfulness.
Absolutely. So speaking of people who are just starting out in voiceover, how did you first come across voiceover? How did you first start out?
So I was an actress for about 12 years. And during that time, voiceover was just kind of something that would arise. So I was living at the time, after I finished acting school in the UK, I went to live in Paris. And I think one of the first acting things, voicing things I started to do was we would dub films. So it would be a film that would be being dubbed, let me see, I think we would dub it, again, into French, but with an American accent. And it was amazing. You'd be in this huge sort of sound studio room, and the film would be there, and they were so clever. Like they'd write in handwriting across this band that moved across the screen, and it was all beautifully synced to try to coordinate, like if the actor was putting their lips together in an sound, they try and match like the French word.
Oh, that's clever.
Maybe we were dubbing it into English. It was French ones that we were dubbing into English. I think that was it for the American market. But and I remember another thing back in Paris, there was, I just kind of, in voiceover thing, I guess I was very lucky. I didn't know it was a thing that you did. And I think my acting agent just said one day, oh, you're going to go do this. Didn't even audition for it. It was like, a pizza ad commercial where I had to dub Cindy Crawford. So she obviously had tried to she was speaking English in the English version. Then I had to be her voice in French.
Wow.
The weird thing was, a week later, I had to dub Cindy Crawford again in an ad for Revlon, I think it was. It was like,
funny. You could be one of those people. You know, there are actors that just dub films, and the like the German guy that voices Keanu Reeves, for example, he's the one that always dubs Keanu Reeves. So you become like a surrogate in another language for that voice, because when people go to the cinema and it's a different voice, they're like, that's not Keanu Reeves. So you could be Cindy Crawford's, doppelganger voice-wise in French.
Yeah, that's right. And the people that do that, Toby, they're so amazing. They're so skilled. The actors that do that, because they have to be in the right energy. They have to watch if the character is moving fast or if it's, intimate. So not only the emotion and reading the script, but also conveying it to the size of the shot, for instance. Accent might be a feature. There's just so many things to multitask.
And they don't have the physicality of acting as well. Like they have to kind of conjure that from somewhere, which is interesting.
Yeah, and I actually think oftentimes people that dub films well, they do use their bodies. You'll see them, moving around behind the microphone, and they try to imitate. So if the character is, has just gotten up off the ground or something, they'll do an effort to put that into the voice.
Exactly.
But that actually brings up a really important point, because people ignore their bodies when they do voiceover a lot, I think. And I'm always very careful. Like, I often voice early in the morning, being in our time zone, because I work with the States or Europe or whatever. And I'm always really careful to warm up first, because it is a whole body experience. If you're voicing just, from sort of the neck up, that it doesn't have the same fullness as if your whole body is woken up and ready, and kind of the feeling or the emotion is moving through all of you.
So interesting. Yeah.
You do some sort of warm up. I know you said you roll out of bed, and that's like you have this great gravelly morning voice.
Exactly. That's actually the thing I was about to say, that my warm up is not warming up, because as soon as I'm warmed up, I lose like a whole octave. So yeah, I usually get up and voice first thing in the morning is great, and then last thing at night as well. So if I try and voice something about sort of it's actually not too bad today, but I've always got a lot of tension around 2-3 o'clock in my voice, and I've had voice sessions where I've really struggled to match the audition I did at the first thing in the morning.
Isn't that interesting?
To consider. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And going back to the sort of physicality of voice work, like I've really, when I've had to do a voiceover that sounds excessively kind of ponderous or basically almost bored, is to like have your setup so that you can like put your head on the desk and just voice it from a completely bizarre voice, because then you'll sound so different from all the other auditions, because you can actually, I'm amazed that microphones pick up everything, even the way your body is sitting, so if I'm doing games where someone's like running or they're basically up and excited, I've got one of those desks that goes up and down electronically with all my gear on it, so I can stand up and then actually start running and doing all that stuff. So, and it really does come across on the mic. So I try and get everyone to make sure they've got a really flexible setup for that reason.
That's great. Yeah, I mostly stand to voice, but there are some projects where I do sit.
So did we talk about... We talked about how you got into voiceover, like from that first gig. And I mean, talking about getting into voiceover, you're kind of the reason I first got into voiceover, because I used to own a studio in Christchurch and at Tandem. And I think you came in for some reason one time and you were like, I'm a voiceover artist. I usually voice from home. And I was like, that's a thing? You can do that? It was amazingly inspiring. So thank you for that. But but what was your
can I just say something on that subject, Toby?
Sure.
I go around spending my life trying to like lecture people on how to make their lives better, like how they should eat, what kind of healthy food, how they should move, whatever. And it is such a joy to have seen you take what smidgen of voiceover like inspiration I gave you and just run with it and explode with it across the planet and do all the things you've done. I'm so immensely proud and so honored to have inspired you to jump into that.
I think you know that it's right though when you hear about something so small and it just gives you so much energy on a constant basis. Like I say to people that you know, if you're doing auditions and it's getting you down that you're not getting any work and you're just not into it, then it's like, well, it's probably not for you. Like you need to absolutely love it. Like love every audition you do, love the challenge, love the craft, and if you do it enough, then it just you get work, and it's, you know, it's like a rolling ball gathering snow or moss, whatever.
Totally. And that's not to say that sometimes it's not really challenging, or you're reading a piece of copy that's, I had a very funny experience. I was once voicing a 100,000 word endoscopy project.
Wow.
So full of medical terms, like really complex. It went on for ages and ages. And one day I was in the booth and I started to voice, and the sentence had the word monotonous in it. And when I hit that word, I started to laugh. I started cracking up. So I actually have that recording and I put it in my blog on my website. But the funniest part was the person who hired me was the only person that saw the blog. I don't know how he came across it. Maybe he a Google search for endoscopy or something, but he wrote a really sweet comment. But I thought it was hilarious that the one person that was sort of like, it would probably be embarrassing if he saw it, happened to come across it.
That's classic. Yeah, we all do have those gigs occasionally, which are a bit of a struggle. Like you do have to dig deep. Like I've definitely voiced like a 35 or 40,000 word, like a TTS training demo for text to speech, you know, to train AIs how to speak. And it
where
didn't
does
actually
that
come
end
to
up,
anything.
Toby?
What's
where
that?
did where I was going to ask you where that landed.
It didn't go anywhere in the end, unfortunately, because the company went down. But it involved, and the worst thing about it was that you had to read sentences that didn't make sense, and you weren't allowed to put any emotion into it. You had to make it really flat, which I really struggle with, because that's the one thing you want to do as a voiceover, is breathe life into things. And this was the opposite. We had to breathe life out of it. And that was a lot more of a struggle than I thought. Or when you're doing telephony stuff and you have to read like 1 to 1,000 and you have to do it exactly the same and not vary the way you say it, which is so challenging.
Yeah. What astrological sign are you?
I usually say pirate.
Yeah.
But they're
I
just
love that.
Scorpio.
You're Scorpio, okay. Because I'm Gemini, and Geminis love, like, they're very changeable and they love all sorts of different things. So the idea of doing like one flat, monotonous thing. But I love your trick about putting your head down and voicing that way. I'm often amazed at how little you have to do. And even like, I sometimes still do some on-camera stuff. And when I do that, it's always, when I'm auditioning things, there's always the note from myself or somebody directing me, do less, do less, do less.
That's the best piece of advice I ever got. The best piece of, that was like one of the milestones in my voiceover career, when I had some voiceover mentoring from a great American voice coach who just said, do less. And every time I read, she said, do less. And she just wore me down over like half an hour to just being absolutely flat. And then I thought this is going to be awful. And then I listened back and I was like, that's like a car commercial read. And I was just like, you know, it was getting the voiceover out of voiceover. And you've suddenly become, and
getting out of our own way. Don't you think?
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah,
I did a project once for Starbucks. It wasn't an ad. I think they were just talking about some charitable work that they were doing or something. But I was directed by 2 directors that really knew what they were doing. And they got me to do it. And I think that's on my website somewhere as well. And it's just like, they just got me to talk. I think, was I doing an American or mid-Atlantic accent? I don't know. They just got me to talk in such an easy way. And it was like falling off a log, you know?
Exactly. And
like you, I thought, oh, that's not enough. You got to push it a bit more. But listening back, it's like they knew.
Exactly.
They knew what they were doing.
And isn't it nice when you get really good directors? It makes so much difference to a voice session.
It's so exciting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, so much.
And I often say to them, like, I like compliment them on how well they direct, because when you get a bad one or someone that's like fresh out of the gates and they think they know how to direct, it can be an absolute train wreck. And I've actually come up with a way of trying to diffuse. If you ever get bad direction or someone's doing something, because often what happens is directors they'll tell you what they want, or they'll tell you how to do it, right? Because they you know, their job is to get what they want out of you. So they'll go, that's wrong, do it this way. And the worst ones will give you a line reading and actually like try and voice it. And it's just, it's horrible because anyway, you know what I'm talking about. But what I say to them is like, instead of telling me how to do it, tell me what you're trying to achieve and then let me do that. Because it's like, with a builder building a house, you don't say, you're putting that nail in wrong, you're doing that thing up wrong. You tell them what kind of room you'd like. You'd like, I'd like it this dimensions and to feel like this. And then you let them do the thing that they're really good at. And so if you explain it like that to them and say, like, I really want to get you the result that you're after, tell me what you're trying to achieve and I'll try and get there with you.
Yeah, beautiful. No, that's great. That's great advice. And I love that you are confident enough that you can hear when someone's doing that. You can recognize and pick up as soon as you hear somebody giving you a line read. Anyone in the industry knows that you never, ever, ever give an actor or a voice artist a line read. It's just the most insulting thing.
Exactly.
And not the way to get the best out of someone,
Exactly. Yeah. So tell me a bit about the sort of tech side of your setup, because so how many years have you been doing this? We haven't established just how long you've been doing it, but it's longer than me.
Well, so I don't really know, because like while I was acting, I was still voicing, but I think in terms of like pretty much doing voiceover, aside from some acting and some writing, I think I've been doing it for probably 15 or more years.
Yeah, wow.
And I was thinking about, like, when I started, I didn't have a studio home setup. And I actually went to, do you remember Plains FM? Community station, radio station in Christchurch here.
Yep.
And they very sweetly offered me studio space in exchange for my doing some radio liners for them. So I don't know if that's still a thing for people that are beginning. I think nowadays it's a lot easier to just have your own setup, and fairly inexpensively you can start to build that. But that worked out really well. So once or twice a week I would go in and record my projects, and I had an engineer who engineered it for me.
Wow,
and soundproof studio, nice mic. And from there, I think I must have bought a decent mic, and I began recording in a cupboard in my home, and it was tiny. I took the shelves out, and it was just like being in a coffin. It was about the size of a coffin, and I'd shut myself in and kind of like not at all like swing your arms around, kind of get loosey goosey with it. And but I did that for a while, and then built a 5-sided studio, which you've seen, Toby.
That's right,
you used it,
Yep.
I think, when you were in town one day.
Yep.
And which I just love. It's all black on the inside, and it's pretty well soundproofed. It has a door that kind of is like a safe door that cranks over, and it's like blocks out the outside world. And it even has a ventilation system, which is really nice in the summer, which brings cooler air in, but with a very soft fan that you almost don't hear. And for me, that's kind of like a magical space. It's like in theatre, we have black box theatres, and I've always loved them. We had one at university, and it's just like in that space, in that black space, anything can happen, So it's not big, like I can reach the walls like this, and if someone's too tall, they have to sit to voice in there. But I have that, and I work mostly with a Neumann TLM 103 mic, and I've messed around a bit. I'm always on the quest for improving audio quality, and always neurotic about it not being good enough. But over the years, I've learned about plugins and things, and learned to do a bit more of my own audio engineering. Well, obviously I do audio engineer my projects, but
what software do you use to record into and edit?
I use a software I work on Macs, and I use a software called Sound Studio, which I just love. And I've tried other ones. When I first started out, I used Cool Edit Pro, which then became Adobe Audition. Is that right?
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. But I also have Twisted Wave, which I sometimes use on other devices like an iPad. But I love Sound Studio in its simplicity, because it just has really what a voice artist needs. And for someone like yourself, who's also an audio engineer, I would say that the like EQ and things like that are a little bit crude. But for myself, it's just so simple and looks very clean. And every time I try and move into another door, I come back to it. So.
Yeah, it's interesting that, isn't it? How it's just like, it feels so comfortable, that kind of glove that you put on of that stuff. I mean, it's interesting that, a lot of engineers now, especially if you're working in certain areas, like something that's going to have post-production, like commercials or the kind of higher end e-learning projects, that basically they just want raw audio these days. They want you to have a good mic and a good room, but basically they just want the sound as raw as it gets, and then their engineers will do, and they actually don't want anyone to mess with it. They don't want compression
Yeah.
on the way in because you can't get rid of it. Like it's, once it's
Yeah.
gone from raw, it's gone. So, I think I always say to people, like, simple is best. It's nice to be able to know how to use compression. And I always give clients both things. So I give them the raw, and then I give them like a processed version to use, depending on sort of what their setup is.
Yeah, and you never know, do you, which kind of client you're working with until you ask.
Yeah.
There are some, sometimes you work with a company and they don't know, they know much less than, even I know about audio engineering.
Exactly.
So
yeah. And you often hear like projects that have gone to the web or something where their voice has got no processing and it sounds really distant and really kind of small, like, it's a really quiet video.
Weedy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
I think I'm a little bit too hypervigilant around noise floor. And so I do use a high pass filter.
Yep, absolutely. What, to get rid of the rumble?
I'm trying to show off, Toby. And there's not that much, but I also do use a slight noise gate because I find it easier to then work with the voice file. And if there are, I don't know, mouth clicks or things that I need to take out, it's just, you can bring it all down very quickly. But interesting to kind of open up the discussion a bit with you and to know that most audio engineers, and good ones, like it to have the flaws still in there.
Exactly.
And
because audio engineers have often got quite advanced tools for getting rid of noise and for getting rid of for rumbles and noise and stuff. Breaths. Yeah, absolutely. So
click.
It's
be anything these days.
De-accent. De-accent. Imagine that. I'd like this in French, thanks, Adobe Audition. Auto translate. I bet it's about 10 years away.
Do you ever engineer other people's stuff, or it's mostly your own?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, sometimes I'm in a project and they'll say, "Who else do you know who does voiceover?" So I'll kind of end up casting for them and then giving them all of the files at once, because it's clear that they're out of their depth in terms of audio and they just want the problem solved.
Polish them up a little bit, put that Toby finesse around it.
Exactly. Yeah. So sometimes I do that, and it is interesting how many things I've learnt from other people giving me audio, and then me going, oh, this is actually a lot harder. Like, I'd prefer it, and I've given feedback sometimes in terms of, like, if you ask for, 3 takes from someone and they give you 3 identical takes, and you're like, well, there's no point in that because I've got 3 copies of the same thing. So, like, do something not wildly different, but do something like quite different so that you can choose the best.
Slow it down, or put your head on the table.
Exactly. Yeah, try one with your head on the pillow.
Toby, do you? Because I tend to, with most of the projects that I do, I'll record a piece of copy. Let's say it's a 2-minute video or something. I'll record it. Maybe I'll do 1 read to warm up, and then I'll record a couple of takes. And then I just take the best take. But if there's any bit of it that I don't like, I will choose another piece that does, I am very perfectionistic around delivery. And I like even if the emphasis is in the wrong place in a word that shows that my mind was kind of wandering at that moment and I wasn't really focused on the meaning, then I will, steal it from somewhere else. But I know a lot of voice artists, they do send 2 or 3 takes on a project. What's your policy?
For me, it kind of it depends. If I'm doing a project at the bottom of my rates, where it's quite a long project, like over 5 minutes, and I'm not charging that much for it, then I'll tell them to just send 1 and say if there's anything wrong with it.
It's a lot of extra engineering, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It is. It's a big deal to do multiple takes. If it's something like, if it's a 15-second drop for something, then I'll give them 3 takes, because it's so easy and quick to pull off. Whereas it just the multiples start to really add up if you anything beyond 5 minutes, because it turns into quite a big production to record 3 takes of 5 minutes and edit those. Suddenly you're at an hour, in terms of studio time. So it depends how much they're paying for. But I mean, I often, do stress with clients that, if there's anything wrong with this, then re-records are completely free as long as it's my fault and not a change in the script, for example.
Yeah, that's lovely. That's really reassuring, I think, and leads to having repeat business, which is great.
Exactly. But the flip side of that is if they're in a hurry, because I'm in a different time zone and they'll only get it sometimes the next morning, and it'll take me 6 hours to respond. If I know that time's of the essence, I'll give them as much as I can on the front end so that they don't have to wait to come back to me. Yeah, exactly. So you do get, I think this is one of these intuitive things, going back to being about intuitive, that you pick up from clients, and you kind of, you get used to working with different sorts of clients, and you get to know how to recognize them and then what the things that they hold as a priority are.
Totally.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about where you get your work at the moment, because you've got a wonderful website. Do you go any? Do you pay to be any part of any voice platforms like Voices.com or Voice123 or anything
Yeah.
like that?
So for a while, and especially when I was starting out, I did Voice123.com and Voices.com.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually I got like a lot of clients. And in fact, I think one of them, I think it was Voices, came to me and they said, hey, you should try our super deluxe, pay
Platinum.
thousands of dollars version,
Yeah.
platinum.
Yep.
And I said to them, honestly, I really appreciate you inviting me to that, but I don't want more work than I have, which was like such a, privileged place to be. And they were like, oh, well, okay, good for you. So at the moment, I still have a Voices account. It's not the platinum one, but I think it's premium or something.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't do a huge amount of auditions through that, but so I tend to set the rate fairly high, that like you can choose which jobs you want to audition for. And I don't want my inbox flooded with Voices auditions. So I just maybe get, I don't know, one or two a day, something like that. But some of my auditions come from other agencies in the States. And otherwise, a lot of my work these days is just sometimes through my website, but also just clients that I've worked with for some of them for years, and we know each other well. And it's just like, it just seems
Repeat
to
business. It's amazing, isn't it? How it just
it's
builds up over
wonderful.
time.
Such a blessing. Yeah,
it is, absolutely. Because I think there's, be interesting to actually like find some statistics on it. Like, 1 out of every 15 clients will turn into a long-term client, and they'll give you work every 3 months. So if you get like every 15 clients you'll get one of those, and then that will give you more work every 3 months. So it's kind of like it slowly builds up until I can envisage a point in the future where it's just residual work, and you don't actually have to market yourself or go to get new clients, because you're just busy servicing kind of an old pool of clients. Plus they refer to, if you give them an exceptional experience, which has been my focus for the last 3 years, then, and they become a real fan of yours, then they're in the same circles as other video people, and they'll recommend you usually.
Yeah, which is lovely. Yeah. And also, I mean, think about it. Once you've established that connection with a client, like, they want it to be hassle-free. They don't want to have to do huge auditions every time they have a project. They just want to know that, you've got your act together on the, let's say, the performance side, on the technical side, that your turnaround times are fast, that you're nice to work with. And then they're just like, oh, thank God. So it really is win-win,
It is, yeah. And you can tell that the clients that they're just like, they say something nice afterwards, and it's like they've found they're kind of like, oh, thank goodness, I've found someone that's really reliable for this kind of read.
Absolutely.
I used to work
but I do want to say, oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, I used to work in radio, and it was, we'd have copywriters that we could call them to do voicing, and you always knew the ones that were best at voicing and would just do it quickly and super easily, and you just go to them by instinct. It was just because you knew it was going to be easier for you. So if you can inspire that feeling in other people of just like, they were just so easy to work with, you will be the first on their list that they call.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to say as well, like, I really feel for people in the current climate with the whole COVID situation, and there's a lot of fear and anxiety around earning your living. And there's a question, when you earn your living, like, pretty much my whole life I've been I suppose freelance. I mean, I haven't had a job except for 1.5 years when I was a copywriter in a company. But so I've had to really trust kind of that flow of the universe. And what I've learned a couple of things about it. And one is that I always say to myself, and so I say this to your listeners too, if it feels like the universe is withholding abundance from you, what are you withholding from the universe? She says, staring straight into a camera. And, it can be like that you have some hidden talents that are locked away that you haven't really been sharing, or it could be even that you are angry about something, but you've got that anger locked up inside. Whatever it is, just listen in and see, like, what do you need to unleash? Because I do believe in the flow, and I do believe that there's enough work to go around, and that we don't have to be competitive with one another. We can find our niche, and we can, I was thinking about this the other day, Toby. There is so much voice work in the world. So many companies and projects and artists need voices. So, just a little faith and a little trust in the flow. And know that even for those of us that do and are living this way, there are times when things are slow. And then you just turn your attention to building your home, for instance. That kind of
Exactly.
thing. You say, thank you, universe, for a little bit of a break. Let me, breathe out and do something else.
I still have weeks and sometimes like longer periods where the work doesn't come in and I don't get the gigs. And I think, there's this really like dark sense of me that thinks, well, that's it. The dream's over. It had to have happened at some time. So this is it. Like, just for whatever reason, it's just not going to happen anymore. And then I think, no, this has happened many times before. Just go and do something, like treat yourself. This is your vacation. You don't get to go away any other time of year because you're a voice artist. So like, this is your time to I don't know, do some work or do some marketing, beautiful, if you feel like it. And then it always picks up, always.
Totally, so right? I know.
Yeah.
I
still get that feeling though.
I love that you would share that, and it's exactly the same for me. And I have the same, demons that are just like, oh my God, that's it. Nobody likes you. You've slipped in your ranking, and it's over.
Yeah.
But I also trust, like, if there comes a time when voicing isn't what I'm here to do anymore, that something will take its place. So really, we don't have to worry. And I want to say to anyone just kind of starting to get into it, I mean, Toby, you and I just share this immense gratitude for this path of earning a living. And, you knew what it was like before this, and you were already working in a creative industry when you were, producing and directing and audio engineering and things. But you also knew that there were like these hours of a day. It wasn't really, you were too creative for that, for that space. And you felt kind of locked into it. And in my 1.5 years of working in a company, I felt like I was a veal, like put in a box, being ready to be slaughtered, like with no light coming in. They put me in a cubicle eventually. It's just like, I just couldn't do it,
Yeah,
so for
exactly,
those of us that are free spirits in that way, I say, just believe in it. It's such a great thing to do. And you learn and grow as you do it. And don't be too hard on yourself, because it is a real learning curve. A lot of people start out and they think, oh, well, somebody said I had a nice voice, and then they pick up a piece of copy and they start to read it, and they think that's voiceover, and they pretty much think that anyone could do it. But there's a real learning curve and a real art to it. I mean, I noticed that for you, like when you started off, you were booking jobs anyway, and you had some avenues in, but there came a point where you actually understood what you didn't know, and you started to coach, and your voice work just went to a whole nother level. Mine too. It's like, we can think, oh yeah, no, the work's coming in, I've got this, I'm really good. And then you coach with somebody really good, and you're like, oh my God, I had no idea.
Exactly.
Completely
so true.
Different realm.
It is so true. And there are just those, I just love how there are these paradigm shifts where you get comfortable and you get complacent, and you do think you've got it all sorted. And as you say, you have some kind of experience or a session or a thought that just breaks it down. And I love the fact that even when I'm sort of, voicing it at this level, which is more than I ever thought I'd be doing in the world, like 10 times as much, I still know there's room for improvement, and there are other echelons to go to. Like, there's
and
always
isn't that
improvement.
Exciting though?
Yeah,
that's not like oh my God, when will I ever get there? But it's just like, what a ride, what a journey.
Exactly.
That you can always do better.
Yeah.
I have to be careful because I tend to be really hard on myself, and like the upside of that is the perfectionism that just takes great joy in getting it just right. I love working with a client who's really fussy, because I'm really fussy. And when we're like, no, let's see if we can get it better. Yeah, that was it. We nailed it, But the downside of it is to be like, sometimes I'll be editing my something that I've recorded, and there's a perfectly good take, and I've gone with my dog clicker. Do you use the dog clicker, by the way?
I just use it now.
Oh, you do? Okay, so I've got a dog clicker. If anyone doesn't know, it's just a device that you use to call a dog and teach it, train it when it's a puppy. But it's quite useful for just putting a spike in your audio file. Yeah. Oh, you've graduated beyond that. Okay, Toby.
I've moved on.
But anyway, what I'll notice is in my file is that there was a perfectly good take, and somehow in my mind it's like, oh, not good enough. You could have brought out more on that word, or you could have. And it's like, Susanna, lighten up a bit. So.
Exactly.
It's self-management, isn't it?
It is. Really. And on the subject of self-direction, because this is another hard thing. Like I run a voice academy here in New Zealand in person, and people love the fact they get in the studio and they love, they do reads, and you say, oh, you were doing this, and they say, oh, I was doing that, and everything. How do you have advice for people on how to self-direct? Because it is a skill entirely separate from voiceover, because it relies on you listening to your performance as you're doing it and judging it. How do you, I can't remember when I started self-directing, or, I mean, it helped that I was directing talent. So that kind of came first for me. But for someone who, like, you know, how did you realize to self-direct and start that process?
I mean, I think I've been self-directing in every area of my life since I came out of the womb, but it's an interesting thing to look at. I think for me, I voice best when there's a sense of freedom and flow. So if I'm too hypervigilant, maybe too caffeinated, I'm not going to do my best voice work. So this is why back at the beginning I was talking about like warming up the body and getting into the flow and feeling that the voice is just very kind of clear and free. And then, oh yeah, okay. So Toby, let's talk about this. Like, you know how in voice coaching they often talk about like talking to a person, right? So is that something like, do you visualize a person and start to talk to them?
Never, no. It's almost like it's almost like I'm voicing to myself in a weird kind of way.
And see, I think that's super valid. And I often will voice to myself because I'm the harshest critic. If I can convince myself of my own authenticity in the take, then I'm doing pretty well. But one of the things that I do, I think of it in terms of dropping in. So you drop into that alignment, which is right for that particular project. And for me, it's almost like, it's a consciousness thing. It's just like, okay, it's almost like I set an intention before I begin. I like to take a deep breath in and let it out, funnily enough, before I start to voice. And you'd think, oh, you need to take a deep breath in and start talking. But try this. You take a deep breath and you just let it out. And there's a sense of relaxation. And then you begin to speak. And it's like you're already, the placement of the voice and the relaxation is already better. And then one of the tips from one of my voice coaches was, and I quite like this, was that you just read the first line several times until you're ready. So it's like, it's not that thing of like the fear of the blank page or the blank audio file, you know, it's just like, just start off and there'll be a certain time, maybe you've repeated it 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 times. And then you're like, there's a yes. And then you just carry on from there.
That's very interesting. So,
yeah. Because for me, this idea of like speaking to a person, sometimes I'll use that as a starting point, especially if like say if I were doing something that was for, I don't know, a younger audience, and say I wanted to have that kind of intimate connection as if I were talking to my 18-year-old niece, for instance, then I might just, you know, imagine her, but then quickly just kind of let that go. Because if you're trying to put your focus on the person again, it's like your mind's having to multitask on too many things. And
yeah, that's so true. Going back to what you're saying about the like, you know, doing little things before you voice, I realized I had this real realization recently that when I was looking at my sessions, I've done live directed sessions, and I usually clean them up for the, you know, before I send them through. And I noticed that I select the take like I do with live directing sessions. So I go, you know, this is a test take 1, read 1, and then I go exactly the same throat clear every time. Like I compared them, and I do it completely. I don't do it because I need to clear my throat, and I don't do it because I'm conscious of it. But it's a bit like in rugby, because I'm from New Zealand, a rugby analogy, right? When it's not like the haka, it's almost like, you know, when the guys are about to kick the ball through the posts, and they have a little weird routine, and they're sometimes quite famous. Like they drop the grass, or they lick their finger and put the wind, and they take a number of steps backwards, and it's always exactly the same because they've been trained to do this mindset thing. And I realized it's exactly the same for me, and I didn't even realize that I'd made this, like, it's like a mantra or something. It's like the thing you get to go into character. And so, and I don't suggest how people come up with that thing, but be conscious that you can have a little thing, even like a little action, like a rubbing your hands or something, like just to get you into the zone,
like a coming home to yourself, you know. And even where I voice, I have a few things that are that inspire me. Like I have I love redwood trees, and I have in Northern California, the redwood trees, that's where I was born, and I have a picture of them in my booth, and just things that kind of tune me in and uplift me or inspire me. Or it might be a quote or something that I just
I love redwood trees so much. I'm just so in awe of them. They're just
and they are in the North Island. There are some.
Yeah, there are actually. That's true. I drive some.
Rotorua, right?
Yeah, and
Oh,
there's a few forests of them actually in Hawke's Bay. There's some as well. There's a plantation of them. Not near as big as the ones in Northern California, but yeah, still lovely trees. I think you're totally right with you try and make the place you voice, if you're able to make your place a sanctuary, like make it a place that feels nice, even if it's just a cupboard. Put something on the wall that makes you feel, nice, like a picture of a view or something, like at least, try and trick yourself into thinking that it's not a claustrophobic cupboard. This is the place I get to do my creative thing, which I really enjoy.
Yeah, I've got in my studio, I've got a window, and it's one of those windows where there's two pieces of glass, but they're sloped or something, or one sloped, I think, so that it doesn't reflect the sound in the same way. And inside, between the two pieces of glass, is a little turquoise frog that was given to me, and I love frogs, and so it just like it sits there as well. So yeah, just little things like that. It's probably the frog is directing every session I do without my knowing it.
Exactly. And it's quite important for people to have the place they go to do voicing, I think. Like I realize some people have to kind of set up in their lounges or set up temporary studios to do practice or to do auditions. But if you can have a place you go to do voiceover and that's all you do there, I think that really helps with this whole, because it is such a mind game, voicing.
It is. And it's amazing how we have to be feeling relatively well to voice well, I think. I think you can't really fake it. And when, I did a number of years acting in theatre, and I made the commitment. There was one time I did a show in played Anna and the King and I, a musical touring the States for a whole year. And it was hugely demanding. It was amazing, but hugely demanding. But even when, you'd get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go to the next place and fly or bus or whatever, and you'd get there and you'd be so tired and you had to do 2 shows, whatever it was, I always was cognizant of the fact that audience, a lot of them were, in the middle of the country, maybe they didn't have much money, maybe they'd saved up for that event. It was like maybe the first time for some of them that they went to theatre. And I always made the commitment to be true and to really show up and to be real and not fake it. Because when you've done a play over and over again, sometimes it's like, oh, here we go again, same lines, whatever. But I would, really force myself to do my best to be in the moment and give it my all. And because people feel the difference. They, I think it's funny that I'm wearing this t-shirt that says authentic.
It's true.
But they, people deserve authenticity, and they're not stupid, and people can hear the difference. And, you and I, Toby, because we've been doing this for a while, you can hear bad voiceover. As soon as like you hear somebody that's like stuck in a rhythm, or they just sound like they're reading the script. And the art of voiceover is to make it sound like you're saying it, and that it's just the next thought that's arising, and that you're just kind of,
and that you're feeling it.
And that you're feeling it. So I love that. So, and we've both coached with Marla Kerban in New York, and one of Marla's things is that the copy travels in through your eyes and it goes into your brain, and then it needs to drop down into your heart and connect with your feelings, and then it comes out of your mouth. And that journey, it's like just seeing it and going in your brain and having it come out, it doesn't do it.
No, exactly.
It's got to also have that, that circuit and be connected. And because you can feel it when somebody is.
If it's not moving you, then how do you expect it to move your audience?
Yes, and we all do bad voiceover at times. I remember one time when you were here, and there was a file on my computer that said bad voiceover, and you saw it immediately, like it was just on my desktop. You're like, well, what's that bad voiceover? And I had actually gathered, like, I don't know where I got them from, but 2 people, a male and a female voice, because I wanted at some point, and I've never done it because I didn't want to shame anyone, but I wanted at some point to say, okay, listen, this is an example of somebody who's just reading it, or somebody that thinks that kind of automated robotic read is voiceover. That's not voiceover.
And it's interesting how the market has shifted in terms of, like, it used to be about the trailer voice, and no one actually talks like this. And now people have cottoned on, especially with advertising. It used to be the hard sell kind of mattress commercial, sort of like kind of feel, but now it's so much more like people have woken up to the fact that that they're being advertised to, and there must be a hook, there must be a scam somewhere because of the way this person's talking, instead of it just being like your friendly neighbor who's got a great suggestion for you.
That's right. And when you hear TV ads or radio ads coming at you, and then all of a sudden you hear one where the person's dropped in and they're just speaking to you like a person. You hear it, and the rest of it you learn to just switch off and tune out of, because it's just not, it's just like, oh yeah, whatever, being, you know, smacked around the head by this car salesperson or something.
Exactly, yeah. So in terms of like the connecting with your reads and the script, like I know when we talked on the phone, we were talking about like what you would and wouldn't voice, and whether you need to really kind of believe in something, like what's being advertised, in order to like engage with it and to make it sound good. Do you reject jobs, or kind of what's your process for that in terms of vetting what you will or won't voice? And if that's important.
Yeah, so that's a really important question. In fact, I had it with a friend of mine this week in Los Angeles. We were talking about, okay, what can we still, from an ethical standpoint, feel okay about voicing, and where do we draw the line? And as you know, somebody that came up through the acting world, it was like your job was to act. So even if you didn't believe in the character, or you didn't like the character, you didn't like the project, you showed up and you acted. And for a lot of my career in voiceover, I've done that. Like I am a health nut. I love health food. And I have voiced for McDonald's, and I've voiced for Coca-Cola, you know, so you could say, wow, that's conflict of interest or whatever. But I've considered them, you know, acting jobs. And my job is to say, if I'm voicing about eating, you know, some, I don't know, highly processed whatever food that I wouldn't put in my body, I might do a substitution and voice it as if I'm eating a beautiful, I don't even know what, raspberry, raspberry fruit salad or something. But I do, there are projects that I just cannot do. And when auditions come in that are, it's especially a way to reject auditions where I'm like, no, sorry, I'm not going to go there. And on the days when I have plenty of work coming in anyway, I'm like, no, I love the luxury of being able to say no.
$30,000.
How about for you, Toby? What's a no for you?
I've kind of boiled it down recently in terms of like I've always had one, which is that I'm not a religious person, and when I get scripts that are trying to convert people, or like insist religion is real, I can't do it for myself. Like I just, you know.
Yeah, but you are a pirate.
I'm a pirate, so I would do pirate scripts.
Okay, not a religion.
No, exactly. Yeah. But the other thing that came up recently was I started voicing for some kind of movement called the Total Human Thought Movement, or True Human Thought Movement, or something. And they had a very vague script, which was sort of, you know, about like there was going to be some kind of world-shattering event, and everyone was going to be involved, and I did it, but I was very uneasy about it. And in terms of like, I don't know what this is actually for. Like the language is so vague, but it sounds like it's quite important, or you know, which if I don't understand where something's going, it makes me a bit nervous. And then they came back with another script that was like, it was something about, it basically sounded like a cult, and it sounded like they were going to exploit people, because it said, you know, you can own your house within 5 years, you won't pay any interest, and anyone can afford this, and it was like stuff that was like, this cannot be true, or everyone would be doing it. And I just said, look, you know, I'm happy to voice the script, can you just tell me what you're advertising and how people get this? And they wouldn't tell me. They just flatly refused to explain anything. And so I was like, well, look, I can't be involved with this if I don't understand it. And I feel like, so basically I've kind of boiled it down to, if it's morally unethical to do it, like if it's one of the biggest voice jobs that I regretted ever doing, which was one of my first voice jobs, and I took it because I really wanted to be a voiceover artist, was like recording like prank calls for people. Like it was a website where people could record like someone doing it, and I did it, and then I just thought, that's my voice just hurting people, and it's awful. So that was.
No, I really honor you for that. I had one that was that I had to throw in the towel on, and I actually can't remember if I think I just let them not pay me, or did a kill fee or something, but it was for spandex. And it was all about like telling women how to, you know, flatten their bum or make their bum bigger. I don't know, flatten their belly. I don't know what it was, but it was just so disgusting to me. And they wanted me to really push it. Oh, that's right. One of the lines was something like, for a perkier bum. And I was like, I'm just not going to be a part of body shaming for women, you know, to use my voice. No, thank you. And it just didn't feel right. And I have a saying in life, which is, if it's not a yes, it's a no. And I honor that, whether it's, you know, say you're out shopping and you see a t-shirt that you quite like, you think, there's something, it's just like, if it's not a yes, it's a no. And just, you know, same with voice, if it's not a yes, it's a no.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's that mentality of, well, beggars can't be choosers. But I think that you can trust that when you align yourself with your own values, you will attract the kind of work that is more appropriate for you. And oftentimes, if you say no to something that just disgusts you, something else really lovely shows up. So
It does. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, fantastic. Small black animal walked in
did
behind you
you
there.
see? That's probably somebody saying it's time for a WALK.
Well, we're nearly done. But before we go, I've got a couple more
Hmm.
questions, small ones, which are basically, I was going to ask you what your biggest voiceover gig you've done, but I was going to change it to say, what's the voiceover you're most proud of? Because that's a bit more affirming.
Beautiful question.
Put you on the spot now. It's hard. I know it's hard
Yeah,
because
it is hard to choose, isn't it?
yeah.
I was very proud of this. About a year ago, I was hired for several months by a company that was doing work that I really believed in. And it's a company called Pazziz, which is a sleep app that helps people to go to sleep with stories. And they were so sweet. And they actually hired me kind of with a salary and everything. And I had a company email, which is really unusual because most of my projects are just, you know. And we worked together. And I just loved the people. They were so young and kind of smart technically. And for months, I voiced and then wrote and voiced scripts to help put people to sleep. And I loved the possibility of helping, you know, being of service on the planet with people that were, you know, struggling to sleep. Sleep's important. We got into doing some other stuff. There were some spin-off apps that had to do with meditation, and I got to write and voice meditations. Yeah, so I don't know that I was very good at putting people to sleep. I think I'm probably more interested in consciousness, in waking people up out of like the matrix that limits them or restricts their freedom. So I think that they have a wonderful voice artist who actually I became friends with, and she'd left the company, but she's now back in it. And I'm really happy for them. She has an American voice, and she's just amazing to fall to sleep to. She's her name's Bethany, and she's one of the top insight timer. Do you know that meditation app? It's called Insight Timer. I think it's the most listened to one in the world. But she just has a quality. She's not a voice artist, but she began in corporate work, and she just found this kind of groove, and she loves to guide people, but her voice is so soothing and beautiful.
It's amazing when you come across someone that just has that is their special skill. They just have this amazingly lovely to listen to voice.
Yeah. And she's kind of felt that way about me, and I felt that way about her. I was like, no, you're the good one. And we had this mutual admiration society going on, but secretly she's way better at putting people to sleep than me.
And it is, I love how voiceover by extension, when you go out into the world and you meet all these different people, like I really like, I love finding interesting voices, not necessarily nice voices, but just the ways people speak are so interesting because it tells, like reading like someone's palm or something, like you can tell a lot about them, you know, by the way that they speak. And in terms of their life that they've had and who they're used to hanging out with and who they think you are almost, because we're all kind of social chameleons and we'll change how we speak to each other.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's once you go down the voice rabbit hole in terms of analyzing how everyone speaks, it's just bottomless. You know, there's, you know, you talk about learning accents and you know, you're like, you know, American accent. Well, which American accent? And you go like, well, Texan. And you go, well, which Texan accent? You know, you break it down into infinitely variable, you know, segments.
Yeah, I love your passion for it. Oh, I just thought as well of another project that I loved, which was, I don't know if you ever came across. Do you know Slavko Martinov, the director?
Absolutely. Yeah.
The Slavko did Propaganda a few years ago.
And you were the voice of that. It was such a good film.
Oh my gosh, it was amazing. And what was funny about it was a very sort of politically, how would you describe Propaganda? It was quite a daring film.
It was a mockumentary, effectively, wasn't it?
Mockumentary, based out of like North Korea and sort of very covert and stuff. And I had to do this very flat read, almost like a expressionless.
Kind of like BBC World, wasn't it?
Weirder than that. and Slavko was amazing at directing it. But what was I going to say about Oh my gosh, there was one of the comments that people had, because it went up in sections on YouTube, and one of the comments someone had is like, there's something really spooky about that voice, like they're hypnotizing or something. It's like they're going to take, and I just like, I was so innocent. I was just kind of voicing just like when in the groove of what we decided we were going to do. But his project ended up winning like Michael Moore's best film in...
That's right. Some festival, wasn't it? His festival.
Traverse City. Yeah. Which is just amazing.
That was great.
So great.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh, well, we've had such a great chat today. We're nearly sort of at an hour, but was there anything else that you wanted to talk about and talk about for our listeners?
Yeah. I think I just want to inspire people really to trust themselves. And, like you're saying, Toby, everyone's voice is unique, and don't think like you have to sound like somebody else. Who you are is enough, and it's good enough, and just begin and practice and catch the joy of it. And, there is tremendous freedom in being a voice actor, and we do voice in our pajamas at times. And because what do you love about being a voice actor?
I love that I work with people all over the world. I find that really interesting. Is to connect
Mongolia
with people.
of late. Huh?
Yeah, that's right, Mongolia. Yes, that's right. We were both involved in that project. That was great.
After Mongolia.
Yeah, and I think I really like that I found something that I not only enjoy doing, but I turn out to be fairly good at. And it's, I wouldn't say it's easy, because like a lot of people think voiceovers, it's really easy. You just, it's short hours, because the actual work you do in terms of when you're voicing in front of a microphone is maybe 5% of the time it takes to run the business, do the editing, all the other stuff that goes around it. So people think that it's all just that, but it's most of it's finding the work and promoting yourself. But it's also like you have to work, like I, get up at 7 a.m, come straight down to the booth and do 3 hours, and then do other stuff during the day. And then I come back to the studio and work sort of through till quite late at night to catch the European market.
When your voice has gotten nice and grovelly again.
Exactly. Yes. So it's I really enjoy having the middle of my day free, which is really nice. But I wouldn't call it easy, because you do have to, like, I have done sessions at like 3 a.m. when I've needed to. So, it's sometimes you really have to kind of realize what a privilege it is, and realize that getting up at 3 a.m. once every now and again is actually part of the job, and it's fine. And the fact that when you go on holidays, you're never really on holiday. You always have to take your gear with you. And, but if you love it, that's the thing I love about voiceover. If you love it, it's not a job. It's something I really enjoy doing. Like, yeah.
That is such a great approach. Yeah, it's no wonder that you've created the success you have, because it's just that's contagious, that enthusiasm for it.
Thank you so much. It's been just utter joy talking to you today. So we need to do it again. We need to catch up and have another chat. So yeah, thank you so much for joining me.
Good luck to everybody. Voice on.
Absolutely.